Being mentally strong is often praised as if it's the ultimate achievement, something to aspire to, something that proves you've mastered life. From the outside, mental strength looks admirable. It looks calm under pressure, unshaken by chaos, composed in moments that break others. But what people rarely talk about is the quiet cost of carrying that strength every day. What it takes from you, what it forces you to hide, and how lonely it can feel to be the one who is always expected to endure. When you are mentally strong, people assume you don't need help. They believe you can handle anything because you always have. Your silence is mistaken for stability, and your resilience is mistaken for immunity. Over time, this creates an invisible burden where you stop being seen as human and start being seen as capable. And while capability sounds positive, it slowly erases your right to struggle openly. You become the person others lean on, but rarely the one they check on. Mental strength often means learning to swallow emotions instead of expressing them. You learn how to stay functional even when things hurt. You know how to push through exhaustion, disappointment, and loss without letting it show. This skill keeps you moving forward, but it also trains you to disconnect from your inner world. Pain becomes something to manage, not something to feel. And over time, that disconnection can leave you feeling strangely numb, as if your emotions are happening at a distance rather than inside you. One of the hardest parts of being mentally strong is how quickly people take it for granted. The first time you endure something difficult, you're admired. The second time, you're respected. By the third or fourth time, it's simply expected. Your resilience becomes the baseline, not the exception. People stop asking how you're doing because they assume the answer will always be fine. And sometimes you even convince yourself that it is. There is also a quiet pressure that comes with this identity. Once you are known as the strong one, you feel responsible for maintaining that image. You hesitate to admit when something is too much. You downplay your pain because you don't want to disappoint anyone or shatter the version of you they rely on. Strength becomes something you perform, not something you choose. And the more you perform it, the harder it becomes to put it down. Being mentally strong often means being the one who adapts. You learn how to adjust your expectations, your needs, and your emotions to fit reality. While adaptability is a powerful trait, it can slowly turn into self-abandonment. You get so good at coping that you forget to ask whether you should have to cope at all. You normalize situations that are unfair, draining, or unhealthy simply because you know you can survive them. Another painful reality is that mental strength can isolate you. People tend to share their vulnerabilities with those who appear soft, not with those who seem unbreakable. As a result, your relationships may lack depth, even when they are built on trust. Others may feel comforted by you, but rarely feel compelled to comfort you. You become a safe place for others while quietly lacking a safe place of your own. There is also a constant inner dialogue that accompanies mental strength, a voice that says, "You've handled worse," whenever you feel tired, a voice that reminds you to be grateful instead of honest, a voice that minimizes your pain by comparing it to past hardships. This voice keeps you going, but it also prevents you from resting. You don't collapse because you've trained yourself not to, but the cost of never collapsing is that you never fully release what you're carrying. Mentally strong people are often praised for their emotional control, but control is not the same as peace. You can be calm on the outside while feeling overwhelmed on the inside. You can be composed while slowly burning out. Strength allows you to function, but it doesn't always allow you to heal. And when healing is postponed long enough, the body and mind find other ways to express what was never acknowledged. Sometimes being mentally strong means being misunderstood. When you don't react loudly to pain, people assume it didn't hurt you. When you move on quickly, they assume you didn't care. Your depth is hidden behind your composure, and your sensitivity is mistaken for indifference. Over time, this misunderstanding can make you feel unseen, as if the real you exists beneath layers no one thinks to look through. There is also a strange guilt that comes with mental strength. You may feel guilty for struggling when others see you as strong, guilty for needing rest when you are capable, guilty for wanting support when you are the one who usually gives it. This guilt keeps you silent in moments when speaking up could bring relief. You tell yourself you shouldn't complain, even when your body and mind are begging you to slow down. Mental strength is often born from necessity, not choice. Many strong people became that way because they had to, because no one else stepped in, because vulnerability wasn't safe, because survival required control. That history doesn't disappear just because you've learned how to function well. The strength that saved you once can later become the thing that keeps you stuck, unable to receive the care you never had. Over time, you may notice that being mentally strong makes it harder to ask for help. Not because you don't need it, but because you've learned to rely on yourself. You don't want to burden others. You don't want to appear weak. You don't want to explain what you've already learned to endure alone. And so you keep going, even when going feels heavy. What makes this especially painful is that mental strength is rarely acknowledged for what it truly is: effort. People admire the outcome, not the cost. They see the calm, not the internal regulation. They see the composure, not the discipline it takes to maintain it. And because that effort is invisible, it often goes unappreciated, even by you. Yet despite all of this, mentally strong people continue to show up. They continue to function, support, adapt, and endure, not because it's easy, but because it's familiar. Strength becomes a language they speak fluently, even when they are exhausted. And while this strength is real, so is the weight it carries. Being mentally strong also means you are often the last person to be considered when things fall apart. In moments of crisis, people instinctively look to you for stability. They expect you to have answers, to stay calm, to hold everything together. And you do. You always do. But what no one notices is that every time you absorb chaos without releasing it, it settles somewhere inside you. It doesn't disappear just because you handled it well. It waits. You may notice that rest doesn't come easily to you. Even when life slows down, your mind stays alert, scanning for problems, preparing for impact. Mental strength trained you to stay ready, not relaxed. Peace can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable, because you're used to functioning under pressure. When things are quiet, your body doesn't fully trust it. This constant readiness can turn into chronic tension, leaving you tired without knowing why. Another hidden cost is how mentally strong people are rarely allowed to change. Once others know you as reliable, composed, and resilient, they resist any version of you that doesn't match that image. If you express doubt, you're told you're overthinking. If you express pain, you're reminded of how strong you are. These comments may sound supportive, but they subtly push you back into a role you may be outgrowing. You're encouraged to stay strong, not to be honest. There is also a loneliness that comes from being emotionally contained. You may be deeply self-aware, thoughtful, and reflective, yet feel disconnected from others. Conversations stay on the surface because you don't want to worry anyone, or because you're used to handling things internally. You become good at listening, but not always at being heard. Over time, this imbalance can make you feel invisible even in close relationships. Mentally strong people often carry unspoken fatigue, not the kind that sleep fixes, but the kind that comes from years of holding yourself together. You're tired of being capable, tired of being composed, tired of being the one who doesn't fall apart. But admitting that feels dangerous because you don't know who you'd be without that strength. It has become part of your identity, not just a skill. There is also the pressure of self-expectation. You hold yourself to higher standards than anyone else does. You don't allow yourself the same grace you give to others. When you struggle, you criticize yourself for not handling it better. When you feel overwhelmed, you remind yourself of everything you've survived. This internal toughness keeps you functioning, but it can also be cruel. You become both the fighter and the one being pushed to keep fighting. Sometimes mental strength delays healing. Because you can cope, you postpone processing. Because you can function, you avoid slowing down. You tell yourself you'll deal with it later, when things are calmer, when you're less busy, when it hurts less. But unprocessed pain doesn't fade on its own. It waits for moments of weakness, for quiet nights, for times when your guard is down. There is a deep irony in all of this. Mental strength is supposed to protect you, yet it often leaves you unprotected emotionally. You know how to survive, but not always how to receive care. You know how to endure, but not always how to soften. Strength becomes armor, and armor is heavy to wear all the time. Eventually, many mentally strong people reach a point where the strength that once saved them starts to suffocate them. Not because strength is bad, but because it was never meant to be constant. No one is supposed to be resilient all the time. No one is meant to carry everything alone. Strength without softness turns into rigidity, and rigidity breaks. The truth is, being mentally strong sucks not because it makes you weak, but because it often makes you lonely, tired, and unseen. It asks you to keep going even when stopping would be healthier. It teaches you to endure instead of express. And while it earns you respect, it doesn't always earn you care. Real growth begins when mentally strong people allow themselves to be human again, when they let themselves rest without guilt, when they admit they're tired without justifying it, when they stop using past survival as a reason to ignore present pain. Strength doesn't disappear when you do this. It changes form. It becomes flexible instead of rigid, supportive instead of demanding. True mental strength is not about never breaking. It's about knowing when you don't have to hold everything together. It's about allowing yourself to need help without seeing it as failure. It's about choosing honesty over endurance. And when mentally strong people finally allow themselves that permission, they discover something unexpected. As mentally strong people move through life, they often realize that their strength has trained others to underestimate their pain. When you don't fall apart, people assume nothing broke. When you keep going, they assume it didn't cost you anything. This misunderstanding can feel deeply isolating, because the truth is that strength doesn't mean you feel less. It usually means you feel everything and still choose to function. And carrying that much awareness without support can quietly wear you down. There is also a subtle loss that comes with always being the composed one. You miss out on being comforted in obvious ways. People rush to help those who look overwhelmed, but they hesitate with those who look steady. Your calm becomes a barrier, not because you don't need care, but because others don't recognize the need. Over time, you may stop expecting support altogether, which reinforces the belief that you must handle everything alone. Mentally strong people also tend to intellectualize their pain. Instead of feeling it fully, they analyze it, explain it, rationalize it. This makes the pain manageable, but it also keeps it at a distance. You understand why you feel the way you do, but understanding doesn't always equal healing. Some emotions need to be felt, not solved. Strength teaches you to stay above water, but not always how to let yourself float. Another quiet cost is how mental strength can delay joy. When you're used to surviving, thriving can feel unfamiliar. Happiness may feel temporary or undeserved, as if you're waiting for the next challenge to arrive. You stay guarded even in good moments, not fully allowing yourself to relax into them. Your mind stays prepared for loss because it has learned that preparedness equals safety. There is also the exhaustion of always being reasonable. You see multiple perspectives. You regulate your reactions. You choose understanding over impulse. While this emotional maturity is valuable, it can also be draining. Sometimes you want to react without filtering, to be messy, to be held instead of holding yourself together. But strength has taught you restraint, even when expression might be healthier. Over time, many mentally strong people begin to crave softness, not weakness but gentleness, a space where they don't have to be composed, insightful, or resilient, a place where they can be uncertain without feeling ashamed. This craving is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that your system wants balance. Strength was never meant to exist without vulnerability. The truth is, being mentally strong sucks when it becomes your only option, when you don't feel allowed to rest, when you don't feel allowed to need, when your survival skills are mistaken for your personality. Healing begins when strength stops being an identity and starts being a choice. And the moment you allow yourself to choose softness alongside strength, something shifts. You don't become weaker, you become lighter. You realize that you don't have to earn rest, justify pain, or prove endurance. You are allowed to be strong and tired, capable and overwhelmed, resilient and human. That is when mental strength stops hurting you and finally starts supporting you. As mentally strong people move further along this path, they often begin to notice a quiet resentment forming inside them, not toward others directly, but toward the role they've been playing for so long. A part of them grows tired of always being dependable, always being reasonable, always being the one who understands. This resentment doesn't mean they are ungrateful or bitter. It means a part of them wants permission to stop carrying everything without being asked. There is also the realization that strength has often protected others more than it protected you. Your ability to stay composed made situations easier for everyone else. Your calm absorbed conflict. Your patience softened chaos. But while others benefited from that stability, you paid the emotional cost privately. This imbalance can be painful to acknowledge, especially when no one ever intended to take advantage of you. It happened simply because you were capable. Mentally strong people also tend to downplay their own limits. They notice exhaustion but label it as temporary. They feel overwhelmed but tell themselves it's manageable. Over time, this constant minimization creates distance between what you feel and what you admit. You keep functioning, but you're no longer fully present. Life becomes something you endure efficiently rather than experience deeply. Another difficult truth is that strength can delay self-compassion. You're kind to others when they struggle, but strict with yourself when you do. You believe everyone else deserves patience except you. This inner harshness doesn't come from cruelty, it comes from survival. You learned early on that softness wasn't always an option, but survival strategies that once kept you safe don't always keep you whole. Eventually, many mentally strong people reach a moment of quiet honesty where they admit, at least to themselves, that they don't want to be strong all the time. They don't want to be admired for endurance. They want to be met with care without having to collapse first. This desire is not weakness. It is a natural response to carrying weight alone for too long. Healing begins when strength is no longer used to silence your needs, when you allow yourself to say, "This is hard," without immediately following it with, "But I can handle it." When you let discomfort exist without rushing to overcome it. In these moments, strength transforms. It stops being about control and starts being about honesty. True mental strength includes knowing when to rest, when to ask, and when to soften. It includes allowing yourself to be supported without shame. It means recognizing that resilience does not require constant endurance. Sometimes the bravest thing a mentally strong person can do is stop proving it. And this is where the meaning of strength changes completely. It no longer feels like pressure. It no longer feels like armor. It becomes something you can set down and pick up when needed. Something that serves you instead of demanding from you. That is the part people rarely talk about. Being mentally strong sucks when it traps you in survival mode. But when strength is balanced with vulnerability, rest, and self-compassion, it finally becomes what it was always meant to be: support, not sacrifice. At the very end of this journey, mentally strong people come to a realization that changes how they relate to themselves forever. They understand that strength was never the problem. The problem was the belief that they had to be strong at all times to be worthy of care, respect, or love. That belief quietly shaped their life, their choices, and the way they treated their own pain. They see now how often they swallowed emotions instead of expressing them, how frequently they chose composure over honesty. Not because they wanted to hide, but because being strong once kept them safe. It helped them survive chaos, disappointment, neglect, or responsibility that arrived too early. Strength became their language long before they learned how to ask for help. But survival and living are not the same thing, and this is where the cost becomes clear. Mental strength, when overused, can make life feel distant. You're present but guarded, capable but tired, proud yet quietly lonely. You function well, but you rarely feel deeply held. People admire you, but they don't always know you. There is a grief in realizing how much you carried alone, how many times you reassured others while needing reassurance yourself, how often you said, "I'm fine," when what you meant was, "I don't feel safe enough to fall apart." This grief doesn't mean you regret being strong. It means you finally see the full picture. And with that clarity comes a softer truth. You are allowed to evolve. You don't have to abandon your strength, but you can release the pressure attached to it. You can let yourself be human without feeling like you're failing. You can experience doubt, sadness, and vulnerability without losing respect for yourself. True mental strength is not about enduring endlessly. It's about knowing when endurance is no longer noble. It's about choosing self-honesty over self-control. It's about letting life touch you instead of constantly bracing against it. Strength that allows softness is no longer a burden. It becomes balance. When mentally strong people learn this, something finally eases inside them. They stop measuring themselves by how much they can withstand. They stop defining worth by resilience alone. They allow themselves rest without guilt, emotion without judgment, and support without shame. And that is why being mentally strong can suck, because without awareness it can trap you in a role you never chose. But once you understand it, once you reshape it, mental strength becomes something entirely different. It becomes a choice, not a requirement, a tool, not an identity. In the end, the strongest thing you can do is allow yourself to be fully human.